How you doing, everybody? It's Wardy here, and we're back at it with our latest and jam-packed Big Mets update segment this evening, January 19th, this Sunday. Because, folks, the Mets are after Jurickson Profar. Yeah, you heard that correctly. We're going to get into the latest reporting, which has Profar connected to the Mets, who exactly he is, and why does David Stearns and Steve Cohen have such an interest in him and his game to potentially fin this line for 2025 and beyond. And from there, we'll get into the southpaw, not named AJ Minter, this time Tanner Scott, the most desirable arm in the free agent market at this point, has now signed, well, yeah, as a surprise, absolutely nobody, the LA Dodgers. We're going to deep dive the immediate impact that this has on the Mets and other teams in the National League, the pros and the cons, and how this is potentially impacting the integrity of the game of baseball. And we're really going to get into here where the Dodgers are doing things right versus where maybe they're doing things wrong, and compare contrast to other teams in Major League Baseball. So let me see your initial reactions to it all in the comments down below, everybody. Thank you so much for spending some of your day, night, evening watching here on the WardyNYM platform. As you smash that like and subscribe button, it really does mean a lot, folks. And shout out to our amazing sponsor at BetUS, which has you covered with all your sports betting needs, folks. But before we get into the latest on Jurickson Profar and Tanner Scott, let's pivot to some very unfortunate news that we found out earlier today. That is former Mets skipper and former MLBer, that being Jeff Torborg, is sadly no longer with us. He passed away earlier today, and Torborg, I wish not only the best for his entire family. I'm sure they're going through a lot right now. My condolences to everyone that Jeff has positively impacted throughout his life, not only as an active MLB player, but certainly as a skipper and everything that he has done since then and in his personal life. It has been very unfortunate to see the amount of former Mets players or just skippers that have sadly no longer with us over the past couple of years. It absolutely pains me to see it every single time. So once more, my thoughts with the entire Torborg family. But folks, now let's pivot into the news, as we mentioned, which has everything to do with Jurickson Profar. And where this actually stems from, interestingly, comes from Robert Murray. Shout out to Vlad here on the X account that you guys can see. Robert Murray, who does a fantastic job there covering MLB through Fansided. Easily the most credible and most reputable guy there that we look at through Fansided. He has been consistent with his reporting. And what we see here is, as mentioned above, the Jurickson Profar is a player of interest to the Mets. They've shown interest in the free agent slugger for the majority of the offseason, would add depth to leadership to the outfield, with Profar coming off a season which he hit 280, 380, 459 with 24 home runs and 85 RBIs. Ignore the innings part. That was a typo there on Murray's end. But what is true is that the Mets are involved in the Jurickson Profar market. And that's what I want to see your initial reactions to it all, everybody, in the comments down below. Because listen, I'm not overly shocked to hear this, right? We know that the Mets have essentially pivoted from Pete Alonso until proven otherwise, and they would still like to land at least one more bat this offseason. Now, naturally, it's hard to replace Pete Alonso and that power and the homegrown talent and everything that comes in between. But if the Mets are really going to move on from Alonso, then they better make sure that they still make this team better for 2025. And that's where Jurickson Profar comes into play. And I would like to apologize, folks. He's a switch hitter. Ignore the graphic down below where I have him batting just as a righty. That's honestly my fault because I take my numbers through Fangraphs right away. And currently they have an error where it says that he's only a righty batter. But he batted from both the right and the left side last year. Just a boatload more that we saw from the right side than the left side, both of which he was beyond proficient there. He had himself a tremendous 850 to 880 OPS from batting against righters or lefties from either side of the plate there that we saw. A 273 average to a 300 average there, and down below a tremendous season, a 280, 380, 459 clip for a 4 WAR, a 139 WRC plus, which means he's 39, basically 40% better than the average batter in baseball. And the simple reason as to how Jurickson Profar got here, I wish I had it, because this is a man who is in his age 31 season finally decided to blossom to be something more impactful than what we saw for the Padres and their postseason run sadly against their Mets in 2022 in the wild card. Profar was without question one of the best corner outfielders in all Major League Baseball, especially out of the National League, that we saw there in 2024. Not only was he an all-star, but this was a guy that from the start, along with Jackson Merrill, really helped pave the way for the Padres while having their big boppers in Fernando Tatis Jr., Manny Machado, etc. He had himself a breakout year for Profar, a former top prospect drafted there that we saw by the Texas Rangers, if not the Oakland A's. I know he's played with both and was with them for a period of time. Had a one-year stint a year ago with the Colorado Rockies where he was absolutely putrid, but now back in Slam Diego, and man, oh man, did he have himself a year. 24 home runs, 85 RBIs, 10 stolen bags. So let's get into why does this make sense for David Stearns and the Mets? And the simple answer to this is Jurickson Profar is an upgrade over Starling Marte. That's exactly why you do it here. If you land Jurickson Profar, you can have him in an immediate impact where he will be playing essentially every day, either in the corner outfields or DH. And naturally, if he's in the DH position, he would split some time there with Jesse Winker. But I would argue that I definitely think that the Mets like Profar not only for his immediate bat impact, but also because of his defensive upside. And let me clarify, when I say upside, no, he's not a defensively proficient player, but Jurickson Profar does have versatility, and I'm sure that's appealing to a Mets team where if they have uncertainty who's going to be starting at first base next year, Jurickson Profar has gotten first base reps the past couple years with the Padres. Not a lot, not a guy that I feel comfortable there per se, but if you're going to emphasize the offense at times more than anything, that's where I could see it making sense there, especially if Profar got some reps at first, Vientos stays at the hot corner, and you go from there. I'm just spitballing here. We're likely going to see him mainly play in the corner outfield / DH, but by doing this, you would make Starling Marte more expendable. And we just heard from Pat Ragazzo, Mets beat reporter there with an affiliate through Sports Illustrated. Shout out to you, Pat. Do a great job as always. He reported a couple days ago how the Mets, going back to the winter meetings, had a trade negotiation with the Kansas City Royals where the Mets would have acquired pretty much a Ryan Stanek-esque reliever, not only in looks, but also in high velo as a flamethrowing right-hander, that being in Hunter Harvey from the Royals, and a trade where the Mets would eat the majority of Marte's contract. That did not happen, but the Mets are still interested in parting ways with Marte, specifically for a reliever that could impact their bullpen, maybe one that has some team control as well. So in the case of Jurickson Profar, if you acquire someone like him, you get an immediate upgrade over Starling Marte, who isn't getting any younger as a grizzled vet, versus Profar, who what we just saw him do in Slam Diego last year is coming off of a tremendous year. And I know you can definitely say that, listen, Profar was great in 2024, but it's hard to envision him having a year like that again, what has felt like such an anomaly. And I don't completely disagree with you whatsoever, but listen, if Profar is going to be in more of a platoon role with the Mets, I love the potential of him really impacting things along with Jesse Winker. Then you look at your outfield configuration of not only having Winker and Profar more so as your fourth and fifth outfielders, but or even your fifth and sixth, you could argue, because right away you're going to have Juan Soto naturally, Brandon Nimmo, Tyrone Taylor, Jose Siri. So that's your 1 through 4 right there. Siri and Taylor will platoon there in center field, barring changes. And then you have Jurickson Profar and Jesse Winker. The Mets will have enough depth in that position to certainly get the job done. And as we pan to his baseball savant numbers this past season, guys, again, absolute chef's kiss. The 94th percentile in batting run value, 9th percentile in fielding run value. Again, the guy is not a good fielder. He is just versatile in his fielding. Similar to another San Diego Padre, a former one, that being Luis Arraez, right? Because Arraez can play all over the diamond, but he's not good defensively really in any position consistently. But because he's versatile, it's appealing to some teams. XWOBA, 92nd percentile. Expected batting average, 92nd percentile. Expected slugging, 72nd percentile. 80th percentile on the average exit velocity. We see 43rd in barrel percentage, 71st in hard hit percentage, 19th in sweet spot percentage, 45th in bat speed, 69th in squared up percentage, 90th in all the following: chase percentage, whip percentage, and we'll give it to him in K percentage and walk percentage because it's 88 and 89. We're rounding here, but pretty much in the 90th percentile and exactly the statistics that you want. The eye at the plate was absolutely through the roof for Jurickson Profar last year. And why do I have optimism should the Mets land someone like him? It's because this is actually something that he's been more consistent on throughout his career. Even though that he has been up and down with either being above a league average batter or below a league average batter on it every other year basis, like a reliever, a Jekyll and Hyde, and what you're getting out year by year. You can see even in 2023 with those putrid numbers and what was a terrible Rockies lineup where he had no protection around him, so that's a key context because he would have plenty more protection with the Mets naturally like he did with the Padres, but 85th percentile there in sweet spot percentage, 74th in chase percentage, 79th in whip percentage, 80th in K percentage, so he's always had a very strong eye at the plate that we've seen in recent years for Profar, but it's about having a deep lineup around him and to finally start to tap into more of that power. This is a guy that usually gives you around 10 to 15 home runs a year, had a career year, but even in a platoon role where maybe Profar gives you more around the 10 to 15 home run range, I'm okay with that. If we're going to have more high contact hitting, going gap to gap, a versatile base runner that can give you some speed as well, along with a guy that gets on base at a very good clip regardless on how much he's swinging and missing on the contact level. So for all those reasons, Jurickson Profar, in my humble opinion, is a very interesting pick for the Mets. There's definitely some risk involved. I don't think that if you land him, it's a slam dunk that he's going to perform like he did with the Padres, but in a platoon role, in a limited role here with the Mets, as long as he would have interest should the Mets give him a nice bag on a 1 or 2 year deal, right? I think that makes a lot of sense here. Again, it makes someone like Starling Marte more expendable, and Profar does fit the group more of the Teoscar Hernandez and the Anthony Santanders. Yes, I would like Anthony Santander a hell of a lot more to a degree than Jurickson Profar, just based on the power implementation alone. A switch hitting true DH fit, I like that, but that feels less likely now after you landed Jesse Winker. But it does make sense with someone like Profar, who can still handle multiple defensive positions, even if he doesn't play them greatly. The Mets don't need to be overly reliant on him in set positions, but to really focus on that bat-first mentality, I think is where they could get the best as someone like Jurickson Profar. So everybody, let us know in the comments down below. Are you for or against this Jurickson Profar pursuit, especially the Mets do allow Alonso to walk? Now, naturally, if Alonso comes circling back to the Mets when everything is said and done as we get into spring training, because he can't still link a deal, I'm absolutely going to be very happy if that happens. But I would still want Profar along with Alonso. Maybe that's a selfishness of me saying this as a fan, but when you see what the LA Dodgers are doing right now, what they continue to do, it makes it harder and harder to stomach getting prepared and mentally set as a fan for the 2025 season, which is exactly why we're now going to pivot now into the latest here when we talk about Tanner Scott and what the LA Dodgers were just able to pull off, which was another significant move, a monstrous move there for their bullpen by landing Tanner Scott to what we just saw there on that 4-year deal. And as you guys can actually see from our buddy Pat Ragazzo, let me just get the little filter out of the way here. You guys can see Pat actually reported a little bit ago that the Chicago Cubs were the preferred destination for Tanner Scott, but Chicago was unwilling to go the 4 years, which I understand to a degree for Tanner Scott and services. He settles 4 years, $72 million, $18 million of average annual value. This also includes over $20 million in deferred payment as a surprise app. So nobody with the Dodgers, along with him having a $20 million signing bonus. So in year one, we're going to see Tanner Scott pretty much get north of $40 million. He's getting an absolute bag, okay? So that right there is exactly why the Mets, for example, looking at AJ Minter, Tanner Scott, and Josh Hader. What do all three have in common? They're the only 3 lefties over the past 5 years have accumulated 5 or more wins above replacement for your F4. That's very impressive. AJ Minter has been in that category. He's coming off of a year where he had a hip injury that led to surgery, which is why the velocity was a little bit down, and still posted a 2.6 ERA. I'm very happy with the AJ Minter pickup at $11 million of average annual value on a 1-year commitment with an opt-out for a 2nd year over Tanner Scott here, who again is getting roughly $20 million AAV. And just for some context, everybody, when we take a look at MLB's highest paid relievers at this point, you guys can see it right there. Edwin Diaz, $19.7 million. Mind you, Edwin is still the highest paid reliever in Major League Baseball. So the idea of pairing not 1 but 2 relievers around $20 million AAV in a pen is not something you typically do if you want to have stability and structure of an organization. And we're going to deep dive why exactly the Dodgers have been an anomaly in certain ways as to why they continue to pull this off. It's beyond just deferred payments. It has so much to do with them being the Dodgers and them being the most desirable destination in Major League Baseball. Them winning the World Series alone and having the best player on the planet gives them an edge like no tomorrow that a lot of fans seem to disregard and just say, okay, we didn't give the biggest bag, so clearly you didn't want to come here. No, there are even rumblings per Bob Nightingale of USA Today, which have been refuted from someone in the Red Sox community. So again, take your pick as to if you want to believe it or not, but Nightingale did state that apparently the Red Sox offered more money and a greater deal there for Tanner Scott, but he settled for a little bit less to land with the Dodgers. Color me surprised. The Dodgers are the most desirable team in Major League Baseball to be a part of. Who would have thought that, right? It's almost like we talked about that yesterday in our Bleacher Report segment around noon. Check that out when we talked about Roki Sasaki and the immediate impact it has on Major League Baseball. But okay, so let's talk about here for all the naysayers in Metsland that are saying, okay, Steve Cohen doesn't like to spend, oh, he's cheap. First of all, stop the nonsense. David Stearns doesn't like to spend, oh, he's cheap. That's why we land here. Can we pump the brakes for a second? Can we just be rational fans for a minute? I beg of you, because there has been nothing rational about what the Dodgers have been doing. And I am by no means opposed to a team spending big. I love Steve Cohen. I'm so grateful that he has spent as much, including basically $800 million for Juan Soto. Kind of a big deal. And yet we're going to act like that doesn't exist now. I get it. It's frustrating. It is very difficult to see as a fan of a team that got all the way there to just, again, Game 6 of the LCS against these Dodgers. That's why I have a lot of confidence heading in next year. Should you have Soto and hopefully some more pieces, they're a better team than 2025 to go toe-to-toe with the Dodgers. But the problem is that the Dodgers are not the same team that they were last year. A injury-riddled rotation is 10 times better now by landing Blake Snell and Roki Sasaki. They have all aces through the roof, 1 through 5, and then you're Clayton Kershaw's your number 6. You got Tony Gonsolin, Dustin May, Bobby Miller, the list goes on and on. As long as these guys are healthy, they certainly have upside, and it's not fair in a lot of ways. But let's talk about what the Dodgers are doing wrong and how it is hurting the integrity of the game of baseball versus what they're doing right. Because there's no denying what the Dodgers are doing right is they're a team that's showing a willingness to spend. And we see that here through Jeff Passan of ESPN highlighting just how much they have been spending here, folks. As you guys can see, when Tanner Scottsdale is officially made, the Dodgers luxury tax payroll for 2025 will exceed $375 million. That is about $70 million more than the next highest team in the Philadelphia Phillies. The Yankees are the only other team at the CBT payroll projected to be over $300 million. So they're being taxed. They're taking that. I understand that. But here's the thing. If we take the Shohei Ohtani contract, they have a current payroll of just under $500 million, which is insane to fathom when there are teams that aren't even spending money this offseason, like the Miami Marlins for the most part, like the Colorado Rockies, you name it. The fact that we are in a league where some teams do nothing and others go as drastic as they do, like what thankfully our Steve Cohen Mets do, and now the Dodgers, we know how lopsided it is, and we know that owners need to spend more, the ones that are stubborn and don't want to. But we also know that there are a lot of other factors that come into play that I think are separate from what they previously were. One, so many teams are in dire need of a TV deal after all the fallout with Bally Sports this past year. There's so many teams without a proper TV deal, and they're losing millions of dollars because of it. That right there is a red flag that we know. I also know that in the case of what the Dodgers are doing and how much they're spending versus their revenue, it's significantly drastic. And this is something that I want to highlight with each and every one of you. Shout out to Jordan Simpson, who made the Mets jingle on the platform. If you know, you know. He sent this to me earlier today. And it's a fantastic thread that I want to break down. You guys, just a little bit more on kind of educating ourselves on the topic of, here's an educational thread you can share with all your financially illiterate Dodger fans and media out there who says your team is just being cheap. And this is also reaffirmed for people who think David Stearns, for example, is being cheap. So let's get into this, okay? The Dodgers made just $26 million last season on revenues of $549 million. So a lot of money, of over $500 million in those revenues. That's a profit margin of just 4.7% despite having the league's second highest revenue. The Yankees had a league high revenue of $679 million last season while making just $2.1 million, a 0.3% profit margin. 6 teams lost money last season. The Mets far and away the most. We lost roughly $300 million. The Padres $116 million. The Blue Jays $45 million. In emphasis, the Mets lost roughly $300 million last year. That's important. While 6 teams made at less than $20 million. The Yankees, the Phillies, the Angels, the Rangers, the Twins, the Tigers. That's 12 of MLB's 30 teams that either lost money or made less than $20 million in profit last season. How many star players does $20 million buy? Half of one. What about teams that have to fund stadium repairs are expected to set money aside to fund new stadiums in the future? How much profit do they have then? The Dodgers have made $26 million in profit while owning 8 players more than $1 billion in deferred money from 2028 to 2046. That's already $55.5 million per year in deferred dollars alone. The Dodgers are abusing their credit card worse than any teenager. Let me go up here. They're abusing their credit card worse than any teenager could that we see, and their financially illiterate fans and media are all watching, cheering them on. And again, I'm not saying that all Dodgers fans are like this. I'm just relaying the thread here. But this is good information. Keep in mind, they made just around $26 million in a season that saw them win the World Series. Anything short of that is a loss on top of $55.5 million in deferred yearly salary. You didn't think we just make these numbers up like the Dodgers fans and media who scream billionaire owners at the top of their lungs, did you? These fans and media fail to understand the simple concept called profit or how much money a company team makes. If you're a billionaire, and this is a key quote here, if you're a billionaire and lose $100 million per year or $292 million like the Mets did with Steve Cohen, you won't be a billionaire for long. And Steve knows this. While Steve doesn't mind having his losses with the Mets, he minds it to a degree, right? He didn't become a net worth of over $20 million by sitting on his hands and losing this amount of millions per year comfortably for something that is more of a luxury for him to do, which is buying the Mets more than anything else. The Mets didn't need to be bought by Steve Cohen. He chose to buy them because he's a diehard fan and wants to help this team win right away. Fans need to remind themselves that when they go out of their way to talk down on Steve Cohen, having any idea to do such a thing is beyond me. It's beyond blasphemy. You're the same fans that are probably born in 2020 because clearly you didn't go through what the Wilpons were, right? You clearly don't understand or comprehend what it was like to be a Mets fan pretty much up until just the past couple years ago, right? It's almost like the Mets just literally landed the largest contract in sports history in North America, but we're just going to disregard that because sadly the Dodgers are in a win-now window like the Mets and have done absolutely insane things with deferred money along with everything that they have done to build their structure at this point. And we're going to emphasize that with Ohtani here shortly. Sporting for a season or two to win a championship is one thing, but it's not sustainable long term. The Dodgers know this, which is why instead of losing $292 million in a season like Cohen, they chose to put it on a credit card for the next sucker who will sell their friend, and that's 1,000% true. Think about it, everybody. Think about Freeman, ownership down. How many of these people are going to be in said positions once the Ohtani deferments of $680 million need to start to be paid out when his contract is essentially done, like when he's done playing? You know what I mean? That's a big thing. Then you add in all the other deferments that the Dodgers are going to have to deal with. They know that they are going to be in turmoil for a significant period of time, but they don't care right now because that's then. That is not now. They're in a win-now stage, so they simply do not care how bad their future may look as we get to the next 5, 6, 7+ years from now. They're also going to continue to bring in star talent regardless of how much they are in the negative on the financial front because of Shohei Ohtani. And before I wrap this up, that actually wasn't wrapped up pretty much on the thread here, I believe. So I know there's nothing else that really needs to be touched on there, but Shohei Ohtani impacted the game in such a negative way, and here's why. And when I say negative, I mean in the sense of that if you're not a Dodgers fan, you view it as a negative, right? Shohei Ohtani did the Kevin Durant-esque move by going from the Angels to the Dodgers. And I don't blame him, first and foremost. He has every right to go to a team to give him the best chance to win. There's nothing wrong with that. But the present, it's set by signing that $680 million deferred contract that he proposed to the Dodgers initially, mind you. This is not LA saying, hey, we need to do this in order to sign you. No, Ohtani recommended it and preferred it. And since then, the Dodgers have been able to go out and make sure they have essentially an all-star in every single position. And that is where teams like the Mets, who have spent a lot of money but haven't spent in all the great areas, is why they're trying to still have a balance with a lot of money coming off the books. They know that even with deferred money, it isn't of best interest to have a lot of these inflated contracts for them on multi-year deals beyond 3 years. Would I have loved Tanner Scott? And as a fan, would I have complained too much, even if we sign him at over $70 million? No, I would be happy to see that happen, but I think context is important. It's one thing what's an LA Dodger team that just won the World Series comfortably against the Yankees like it was nothing in 5 games, to then landing Roki Sasaki, another ace-caliber starter for them, potentially for the next decade plus. Blake Snell, who's a Cy Young ace-caliber starter year in and year out as long as he's healthy. Then you bring in, again, as a depth outfielder, Michael Conforto to a lesser degree. Tanner Scott and everything else that they are building. The Dodgers are not only focused on being a perennial winner, they're focused on trying to build a dynasty right now. And they're absolutely en route to do exactly that. And that's exactly why this is a problem for Steve Cohen and our Mets, because as frustrating as it is as fans, it's also reality that the Mets need to continue to do more. Like, it's crazy to say, but they have to, right? They still have to. I have comfortability with the Mets in certain areas, right? I think that they absolutely can go toe-to-toe with the Dodgers, but do I have confidence that they will surpass them right now? How can you? Even after everything they did in the NLCS last year, a lot happens in a 162. I understand that. A lot build-up happens in the ebbs and flows of what is up and down in a 162 leading to playoffs. But what is also true is that while it's not a lock that the Dodgers will win the 2025 World Series, it was abundantly clear that by the team that invested the most money to make sure that they had all the star power after building for multiple years with Freddie Freeman, with Mookie Betts, with Max Muncy, and everyone else in company. This has been a multi-year-long process to finally get the Dodgers where they were, but it still costed them $1.2 billion last offseason to finally get over that World Series hump that they've been trying to get back to from all those years ago. The Dodgers proved that by spending the most, you will win. It will happen. And if you don't spend, your likelihood of winning is slim to none. It's not going to happen in today's game, which is exactly why a couple years from now, when we have to go through the CBA again, we're likely going to face a lockout, and the Dodgers are going to be the fat face as to why exactly that is. Everyone focused on Steve Cohen and the Steve Cohen tax of over 90%, which is still an absolute joke made by the league itself because they were so fearful of Steve. Well, Last time I checked, Steve Cohen isn't the major problem in Major League Baseball. It's the LA Dodgers. But because Rob Manfred loves how profitable the Dodgers are to Major League Baseball as a whole, and knowing that the Dodgers have been a historic franchise, unlike what's been a laughingstock in a lot of ways, which is our Mets, and Mets fans, we know it best, don't act like we haven't been through everything with the Wilpons, have been a team that's been known for a lot of things, but not so much on the successful winning front consistently. The Dodgers have been a perennial winner on at least winning the NL West year after year after year. Now they just got a lot better for 2025. And if you're the Mets and if you're David Stearns, while I do not want them to absolutely have all these inflated contracts and to hurt themselves, or we could actually have problems down the line, what I absolutely do, and I certainly encourage this Mets team to do, is to continue to make moves. They absolutely need to. Whether it's Profar and or Alonso, one of the two. Adding another reliever is vital, right? And then you go from there. How I look at the structure of this Mets lineup has me excited for the 2025 season, but I know that more needs to be done here. It goes without saying. And when I emphasize that the Dodgers are hurting the integrity of the game of baseball, is because we are reaching a lopsidedness point where we have never seen it in the history of the game, going back to when there was just a couple teams in the league, all those years ago, right? Since then, we have seen a lot change, but the Dodgers doing what they have done has put them in a class of their own. And their ownership there, everyone deserves endless credit for making it happen. They're not doing anything illegal in their process, but what they have done now is put a massive red flag and a clear attention spot to a couple years when we have the CBA again. And for anyone wondering just how much this will negatively impact the game, just give it time. Not only are we seeing in real time how fans have no interest to watch the regular season because they firmly believe the Dodgers are going to win it all again, so you're going to see fan attendance drop for teams across the board, especially teams that don't spend much to begin with there, that are more in the minority in the small market organizations. They're going to continue to plummet, and we're going to see that in real time. So folks, I'll just say strap and buckle up and get ready for the ride. We know Steve Cohen and David Stearns have to do more. Do I think that Stearns and Cohen are at fault for this? No, of course not. And I think if we just take a moment to step back and say, hey, if it wasn't for the Dodgers, there's not one Mets fan complaining about the status of how they've operated and how they will continue to. But because the Dodgers are in the same window as the Mets right now, this is why it sticks out like a sore thumb. And we have to be cognizant of that because Lindor isn't getting any younger. Soto's in the peak prime. I'm not as much worried about him. Nimmo isn't getting any younger. Some key pieces of this lineup we need to pounce on. We need to take advantage in their prime years. If the Mets allow themselves to just be a playoff contending team and then to falter to LA, say consecutively year after year after year, the next 3-4 years, then by the time that they can finally start to get over that Dodger hump, should they act in a lateral move, they won't, but let's just say hypothetically they did and didn't make proper moves each year, then we would find ourselves already having wasted what Lindor was supposed to be here for, and then we'll have to deal with the final 5-6 years of that contract not aging well. Brandon Nimmo, same applies, and the list goes on from there. Mets fans, let me know how you feel in the comments down below. I'd greatly appreciate to hear not only Jurickson Profar and the current player pursuit there, but also the latest on Tanner Scott, another tremendous player landing with the LA Dodgers, because the Dodgers have the championship pedigree. They have the best player in baseball. They're the most desirable place to play by far. And if you are a player right now, you can't tell me otherwise, because unless you have different priority separate from money, but you want to focus on being the face of an organization, that is the only thing that I think we could as fans come up with immediately and say that would make sense why you wouldn't sign with the Dodgers. Otherwise, who wouldn't want to be an LA Dodger right now? And furthermore, who wouldn't want to be an LA Dodger fan at the moment? We're all envious, we're all frustrated, and there's valid reason for it. But what is going to change in the game of baseball? What are other teams like our Mets going to do? That is what we have to sit and wait and find out for. So fans, thank you guys again for watching. Drop all your thoughts down below. And this is your guy Wardy signing out. Let's go Mets, baby. Peace.